Good afternoon and welcome to our interview series with our 2021 Hope Rising awardees. Today, I'm joined by Deputy District Attorney at the County of San Diego, Fanny Yu. Welcome, Fanny, and congratulations on receiving the Hope Rising Award for 2021.
Thank you, Connor. I feel very humbled to receive this award among all the other honorees this year, so thank you.
Awesome. Well, we're pleased to recognize you and your work. So thank you for your work in this space. I want to give a brief background on you just so we can brag about all of your wonderful accomplishments and give some context for your work before we dive into some questions. So in the area of human trafficking and the commercial sexual exploitation of children, CSEC, Deputy District Attorney Yu has distinguished herself as a local, state, and national leader on issues and best practices surrounding juvenile human trafficking victims. DDAU consistently represents the DA's office to raise community awareness about human trafficking and the commercial sexual exploitation of children. Many agencies such as probation, health and human services, county council, and attorneys representing juveniles collaborate with DDAU to create better outcomes for the youth affected by CSEC. Although she is a prosecutor, she has deep compassion for the youth she serves. She's very empathetic, able to be collaborative and creative in coming up with case plans and appropriate sanctions to positively affect the youth. Partnerships and collaboration with DDAU have resulted in increased early identification of juvenile justice youth with CSEC concerns. The early identification allows better case planning and earlier referral of services for youth and families. Her passion and dedication have been tantamount to the rehabilitation and success of innumerable survivors. Thanks so much for joining us today. I think I have a first question for you, Fanny, is what made you get involved in anti-trafficking work?
Well, I was very fortunate to have been assigned to the Sex Crimes and Human Trafficking Division kind of midway in my career in 2009. So at that time, I was able to learn about what we used to call pimping and being able to see the complexities where, like, how victims were recruited and how oftentimes victims don't see themselves as victims. And so after having a couple of years handling cases, prosecuting the adults, I realized I prefer to work closer with the victims. And so I was fortunate enough to be able to make the change to the juvenile division of my office, the district attorney's office, and specifically to hold the team leader position dealing with human trafficking and sexual assault type of cases. And what I had suspected, and many of us who work in juvenile justice, was that there were so many kids that would come into juvenile justice for different types of criminal offenses, but in fact, they themselves were victims of commercial sexual exploitation. And so for juvenile justice, it's all about rehabilitation. It's about helping the kids have that future. And we can't just simply say, well, you're on probation for theft, let's say, but ignore the other red flags of their victimization. And so it was really important for me to work together with the juvenile court, with probation, with the attorneys who represent these youth, to come up with some way that we can better, number one, educate ourselves by the experts, the survivors, lived experience experts, in order to be able to recognize the signs. That way, if we better identify, we can then work together to offer services.
Yeah, completely. It's like putting that whole picture together to best remedy the situation. I'm curious, you said specifically you're working with juvenile survivors of human trafficking. What are some of the biggest gaps in services that you're seeing that maybe these folks need?
Well, for all human trafficking survivors, housing is a big need. You'll probably hear that among many different honorees, as well as stakeholders that work in anti-trafficking. So the hardest part is, when we do talk about human trafficking, we're always looking to see whether our youth are safe. But sometimes it's difficult because a youth may not want to be removed from their home, nor should we, because we want to be trauma informed. But at the same time, we're also wanting to have them be able to stay away from those negative influences, the perpetrators, for them to be able to have that capacity to engage with therapy or other services, just to be a normal kid, a normal teenager. So again, I think it's hard because we don't have a lot of housing options for the youth. And then the other piece, I think, is also making sure that our youth are comfortable enough to engage with service providers. So again, we can have services and we can have providers either doing therapy or different types of skills building. But it always starts, I think, first with letting the youth know that we're meeting them where they are. I think that's a really important piece with working with this population.
Yeah, it seems like establishing some sort of sense of trust is kind of paramount to your success, and establishing housing, and then also providing a level of trauma-informed care to really get at the root of the situation. I'm also curious, what would you say are some of the biggest challenges that you face in this work?
One of the challenge, I think I've seen over the years, and I've been in our juvenile division for 8.5 years, dealing with this issue and serving the youth. Oftentimes there is that pull of them going, and being involved with the group of people who will engage them in the life, as we say. And it's tough. I think a lot of attention has been spent the last several years on social media and how much influence social media has and is part of a life of a teenager. And so I think a lot of the challenges is how do we as a society and educators, even start young, right? At elementary school, really be able to teach the young kids, because everything is on digital platforms, right? As we went into COVID, schools went on distance learning. So it's about teaching our kids kind of what I call cyber responsibility, right? Being able to understand, yes, there are benefits to using social media, but there also comes with a lot of responsibilities, as well as the potential safety concerns or traps, the red flags. I mean, we constantly talk about how youth or even adults don't fully have their brains develop until 25. So how are we then expecting, right? So it's almost like we give our children cell phones because we want them to have access, but then we get upset when we found out that they don't know how to properly control themselves and who they talk to or what they're doing on social media. But again, right, if they don't know the boundaries, and so I think a lot of it has to do with even prevention work, which I know that we do a great job in San Diego County, where we're trying to educate teachers on how to talk about this issue, educating parents, right, educating the students. Because again, I think the better that the youth are able themselves to recognize when something is a potentially dangerous situation, right, to empower them to say this is not right, to not engage it, then I think we will have better outcomes, right?
Yeah, it seems like education is fundamental to this justice-oriented approach in making sure that folks are informed about ways in which we all can contribute to a world and build a world that is free of human trafficking. I'm also curious, for folks who want to get involved, getting educated is something that's really important, but what sorts of tangible or maybe monetary ways do you think folks can get involved to help build a safer and a more just San Diego region that is free of human trafficking?
Well, one of the easiest ways of anybody who is on the website and is looking at the stories behind the honorees this year, the San Diego Regional Human Trafficking and CSEC Advisory Council is an open council where anybody can come and attend the meetings to learn more about what San Diegans are doing. And the advisory council is consisting of so many different disciplines. So we have not only the education and research, child welfare, we have the prosecution, the law enforcement aspect. We have also our medical group, our victim survivor experts, our victim services providers, and community. So if anybody is interested in getting involved but doesn't really know how, I would encourage them to get to know, come to a meeting, get to know maybe one of the subcommittee chairs to find out where they fit in, depending on their occupation and interest, and then to find out more. Because before you even, I think, plug in money or time, you have to make sure that you're spending that time or money at a vetted organization with a cause that is doing something that has, effectiveness, right? And then also, I'm a big proponent that we need to support as a community our lived experience experts. And lived experience experts are those who have gone through the experience, have been able to not only survive and thrive, but may want to come up with their own nonprofit, but they need the funding, they need the sustainability. And they're the best people to relate to our youth. So I'm a big advocate to making sure that we are always having our lived experience experts always as part of our discussions, because they lend so much of their knowledge and wisdom. And also then to make sure we can support them in their endeavors to serve the youth and the people in their communities.
Completely. Keeping those survivors with lived experience at the center seems like it should be a priority, but it is like the number one priority, really.
Right.
So, yeah.
I always think that, so much of the topic of human trafficking has been in the media over the last several years. And a lot of funding has gone through the fight against trafficking, which is so important. But I do think that no matter what we do, we always have to include the lived experience expert piece. So whether it's them being part of the advisory boards, them being part of any type of discussions on policies and procedures to give that lens, that perspective, and to also collaborate with them in terms of rolling out services for the youth. So in my experience working with RISE Court, the collaborative court in the juvenile justice, its acronym stands for Resiliency is Strength and Empowerment. We actually vetted in 2016 during the planning stage, we vetted that name with our survivors, our lived experience experts, because we wanted to make sure it was a name that they could feel would not label the youth or discourage the youth, but actually be empowering, right? So that was really important to the planning committee.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. It's a perfect segue into my next question about RISE Court. Could you tell us more about that? Maybe give some context for the work that y'all do?
Absolutely. And I have to say, I share this award with every single stakeholder and agency I have worked with, because again, I think any kind of accomplishments or effectiveness isn't by me alone. It's supported by my own office, of course, DA Summer Stephan, I always want to give a shout out to, but the RISE Court team is amazing. So RISE Court was started in October 2017. It serves youth that are already on probation. So unfortunately, for youth to be part of RISE Court, they had to enter the juvenile justice system because there was a law violation. But once they are placed on probation, the youth have the choice. So again, it's important to note that RISE Court is voluntary, because we felt it was important to give that choice to our youth. So the youth can decide if they believe that they can benefit from working with a big team that is offered through RISE Court, and whether they fit the parameters. Because again, some youth may say, I've never been trafficked, I've never exchanged sex for anything. How dare you accuse that? And they don't want to, and that's okay. We don't want anyone to feel bad. But I think that the fact that it is voluntary is so crucial, because part of the component is to be trauma informed, to provide services such as therapy, mentorship. And we felt that if a youth wanted to come with us, then they're more likely to be open and then engage with therapy or mentorship, right? Rather than having to be forced into this program. The program has a lot of stakeholders, not only a juvenile court, the public defender's office, the DA's office, but behavioral health services is part of it, child welfare is part of it, of course, probation. We have an amazing probation team. We also have our service providers. We have North County Lifeline, San Diego Youth Services. We also have our wraparound service providers. We also work closely with our Voices for Children organization that provide the court-appointed special advocates. And then if necessary, we will even go outside to partner with other community-based organizations if we feel that a youth needs that type of skills building or engagement. And one of the biggest thing that I love is, about RISE is we want RISE to very much involve the youth. So it's not about the youth just coming to court once a month and then being told, oh, you have to do X, Y, and Z. The case plan, the progression of the case, we constantly are looking at it together as a team involving the youth and their families. It's always asking the youth, what do you need? Okay, if you're struggling with something, what do you think could help? What are your dreams? What is your goal for the next 6 months or a year? And trying to figure out if there are things that we can do to help that youth. So the youth says, oh, I want a job. Even in COVID, how can we help? Maybe it's not about getting a job right away, but it's about making sure that the youth knows how to do a resume. How would the youth do well in an interview? Connecting them with specialists if they're struggling with school. That is an important piece too, to make sure that they have the support they need with advocates helping them. So again, we're trying to look at it holistically, but it's always, I think, with the lens that we want to instill hope in our youth. And there are times when the youth does have setbacks, but I think what's great is letting the youth know that we are always walking with them and letting the youth know that, things happen, mistakes happen, and we as adults still struggle, but that it's okay to ask for help. It's okay to need help. And I think it's, again, going back to how do we help build a youth's toolbox of resources? Because at some point, the hope is they're going to get off probation. They're going to get out of RISE court. And we want them to be able to have that set of knowledge and resources to go out in the community if in case after they're, graduated from RISE and out of probation, that they know where to go.
Yeah, completely. What a multifaceted approach then. Thank you for sharing all of that. I imagine thinking about all of this and situating yourself with this in this work and in these spaces of real intense trauma and emotions and just crazy stories, that you have to set aside time outside of work to take care of yourself. What are your self-care practices? What are they, and how do they help keep you grounded?
Yes, for a long time, I think it was the joke. I mean, my husband's a therapist. He's a licensed marriage and family therapist. So I'm very, thankful that he's taught me so much over the years, but no, he doesn't, he's not my coping mechanism therapist. But for years, I think I used to fight that term self-care. I remember going to a, child trafficking seminar, and the last speaker was on self-care. And I thought, I have so much work to catch up on. I had to check my work email. I don't have time for this, right? It was horrible. But years ago, and so my colleague that was there with me said, Fanny, don't you think you're exactly the person that needs to stay and sit in that seminar? But yes, self-care is so important because working with this population, trying to deal with either safety planning or trying to help the youth and family with other needs, there could be lots of crises happening all the time. And it is very stressful emotionally, mentally. And so I think the thing I've learned over the years is don't expect perfection. I think sometimes, and what I mean by that is I think sometimes we can feel, those of us who are working in this area can feel down, okay, or a little sad because we may feel that we're trying so much, but are we making any, headway? Are we making any difference in this youth's lives? And, in RISE Court, we often talk about as a team, how do we define success? And defining that could be hard in itself, right? What does success look like? And I think what I've learned to tell myself at the end of the day is I've done my best. Did I do my best with what I was able to do? And I think as long as you can answer that I've done my best with what I was capable of doing and knowing who I also needed help from. So I think sometimes the part of self-care is we think we have to do everything perfectly and by ourselves. And in this area of fighting human trafficking, no one person or one organization have the perfect answers or could do it all by themselves. And so I think the beauty of San Diego County is we've recognized how important and how willing we are all able to come together with different types of experiences and expertise. And everybody has a role to play in this area in spite of human trafficking. And I think that we're better together than apart. So I think oftentimes if I'm feeling down, where I feel like I'm not doing enough, I need to tell myself, did I do the best I can for today? And then second, I feel that I need to reach out to someone who can understand what I'm going through and to just either let them know what I'm dealing with. If it's difficult, if it's especially difficult, I'm having a hard time, right, with a youth and what the youth is experiencing. And I need to also share my thoughts. I think that's really important as people who are what we call boots on the ground, working day in and day out. It's so important to have a support system, people that you feel you can trust, that you can go to share your burden. I think, again, that was hard for me because I didn't want to burden other people. But it's so important. If not, if we're telling kids it's okay to reach out and get help, but yet we as adults are not willing to do that, right? Then we're not going to be very honest, right? And we're not practicing what we preach. And so I think that's the two key items. And then of course, for me, I love hanging out with my family, my husband, my two sons, just whether it's game night, or just going out for a walk. I know for other people, it's working out or traveling, or cooking or eating. So I think those are all great things. But the most important two things I've had a hard time that I've learned over the years from experiences, again, just telling yourself that you're good enough, and then just also making sure that you have support people that you can reach out to.
Completely. It's all about your network and surrounding yourself with people who build you up. Thank you for that. I'm wondering, I have one final question for you. What gives you hope? The theme of our event this year is Hope Rising. We're thinking about justice and what it means to have some sort of hope or some sort of wish for a brighter future on the horizon. So what gives you hope?
What gives me hope is the fact that I see, and I'm getting kind of emotional, but I see good in every person. I think that what gives me hope is we are not defined as individuals based on our experiences. So meaning what has happened to us is part of who we are, but it does not define who we are. And then also that all of us have something to provide and to give to this world, right? We can all make a difference is what I'm saying. Each person can make a difference in their own special way. And so we need to come together. And I do feel that when I see people working together to do their part, it really does give me hope. And then what gives me hope is seeing our youth. When our youth, tells us, what they're going through. And when our youth share with us authentically their selves, that shows me that they trust us. That shows me we've earned that privilege of working with them. And when they are able to, give us insight into how we can do better too, it's amazing because it goes both ways. I've learned so much the last 8.5 years from my youth. And I get my hope from them because I do see that change is possible. So somehow, even in a lot of the negative things that's been happening, I think I draw hope from the fact that each of us have good in us and each of us can contribute, and that change is definitely possible.
Yeah. And I'd say change isn't just possible, it's actually happening because of the work that you do. So yes.
Oh, thank you. Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you for that, Connor.
Yeah. We're so thankful for the work that you're doing in our region and in the world, just keeping things very justice oriented and focused on a future where we don't have to worry about these kind of terrible atrocities like human trafficking. So thank you so much for your work that you do with survivors and work that is centered on what is right and what is just. And we are so pleased to recognize you this year as one of the Hope Rising awardees.
Thank you, Connor. I'm just so humbled, and I really appreciate Point Loma Nazarene University for this award. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. Thanks so much for your time today, Fanny. And we look forward to congratulating you at our event in this summer.